I am charged to present the next speaker is Dr. Christa Goodell. She's coming here.
Is my microphone on?
Yeah, Christa, it's our technical manager for influenza and PRDC, and it's an honor working with Christa the last 2 years and a half. Thank you, Christa.
Thank you, Eduardo. Great. Well, I'm actually very excited to visit with you today. What we wanted to do was, as we, as the swine team, have now been able to get into the flu realm for this last year, we really wanted to take a look back and speak with you about what we've learned. We've had some great successes with Prevenza. We also understand that flu is extremely complex. And so as we circle back around and say, how can we better address with the best tool that we have out there, but it is a tool, thinking about what we've done in the past and had successes at, what does that look like? And coin a few phrases from people on our team is we really need to get it back to the simple side of complex. And I think there's a lot of readisms that we'll probably talk about today in this little talk as well. So when you hear about whole herd approach, yes, we've heard about it before, and we really feel that as we talk about solutions with flu, it is going to take that whole herd approach moving forward. So reminders of what made the whole herd approach a success. What have we learned in this past year? We actually have a much better appreciation of what it takes to report and to measure flu. It's been very hard to actually say, flu causes this. It has this impact out in my production system. And we really need to do a better job helping the producers, as well understanding ourselves as veterinarian, the true cost of not just flu, but when flu is involved, what the whole thing looks like. It's not just flu alone. It seldom is just flu alone. In fact, when it's just flu alone, it's not as much of a problem. So really understanding, we need to have a better appreciation of how to appreciate that impact. We need better methods to measure that. And Dr. Lowe is going to talk on Sunday as well. So we've got some great successes that we're going to have at the industrial partner session. And Dr. Lowe is going to talk about better methods to measure flu, what it might take in the future. And then we also need to appreciate that when we look at closeouts really make everything just the average, right? So how can we get a better handle of not just looking at the end, but looking at pieces along the way, the real-time in-process data, and getting value out of that in-process data. So this has been a huge learning for us. Another one, I'm sure it's not a surprise, but there's a lot of flu out there. There's a lot of flu out in the swine industry. And of course, we've heard numbers of 80%, 90%. Those numbers are all true. We all of the Prevenza experiences that we've had, flu has been involved. There's lots of different strains, even within the same farm. And there's lots of citations out there now. There's a lot of data that says this is common. This is what flu does. Many pigs are exposed at younger than 10 days of age, right? So trying to get pigs to have a great immune response when they're getting vaccinated at 3 days and then getting exposed at 10 days is really hard. So again, how can we go about this better? It's the whole herd approach. For the site of infection, immunity at that site of infection, you can't get any better than something like Prevenza. It's right there at the mucosa. It's intranasally administered. So it is the best tool in the toolbox. The question is, how can we do a better job about approaching influenza control with this tool, this new best tool that we have? Flu, like PRRS, requires this whole herd approach. It requires the 5-step process, the infection chain, and then the prevention chain. And we know that. We understand how to do that, and that's why we're really, as we think back on how to make this the simple side of complex, let's talk about whole herd approach and understand that we've done this before and we can do it with flu. So what's the ultimate goal? We just need to reduce the exposure in our gilts and our piglets, which is minimizing transmission. And we need to immunize so that we're preventing that circulation of flu. Again, in the gilts and the pigs particularly, That's protecting our sows, and it's protecting our business, and that's maximizing immunity. Reed says it all the time. Minimize transmission, maximize immunity. So what is the whole herd approach? So the what is that it's a control plan to reduce the influenza endemicity and its impact farrow to finish. Where do we do this? We need to directly reduce the susceptibility in the pigs at the gilt developer, in breeding and gestation, and in the farrowing units, particularly in the farrowing units, these high-risk areas of where it's always circulating. How are we going to do this? Two-pronged approach, right? Another Reedism. Two-pronged approach, we need to implement a strategy to push that resident flu out of the farrowing so that we are ensuring that the vaccine has a chance to immunize these pigs, and then we implement a strategy to eliminate that circulating flu in the GDU. Two-pronged approach. We've heard it before. We can do it. The expected outcome is to minimize the incidence, the expression, and the impact of flu in the herd, and then, of course, the downstream pigs, where we get paid. So what are the fundamentals? I've pretty much did a literature search, and it's all on my hard drive, so it wasn't hard, but I really kind of got overwhelmed and spent a lot of time. There are 40 citations here. I'm sure this is not all of them, but it's awesome work. It's work done by Dr. Tora Morell, Dr. Colhane, and it's all within the last 10 to 15 years. And what we know about flu is that it's high transmission rate. It's an R naught of 10. Even in low prevalence, there's still flu in the nursery. A little bit of flu can still become a lot of flu in the nursery. Aerosols carry flu, particularly in large droplets, so it does carry short distances. The transmission risk increases with the increasing number of shedding pigs. IV changes. Flu is constantly finding a way to stay alive and change. And, oh, by the way, it co-circulates, and there's lots of different flus at the same time in many of our herds. What about maternal antibodies? We know that transmission rate can be impacted by maternal antibodies, but it still occurs. We know that maternal antibodies and killed vaccines do protect against clinical disease, but we also know that it doesn't prevent infection, and that you can still have antigenic drift, and you can have that diversity maintained at the sow level. Can I go back there? Transmission is prolonged in maternal antibody pig populations. If it's not perfect, you can still have flu carried on, and then when you've got all this variability in our immunity in those pigs, it just allows the flu to stay in the nurseries for a very long time. We also know that pigs are born free of flu. This is not PRRS. This is not something that comes in utero. This is not something pigs pick up in the colostrum. So our chance of success is quite high, right? We just have to address the transmission, and we have to address the immunity. What are the cornerstones of whole herd approach? The subpopulations. Again, going back to Dr. Tora Morell's work, we know what our subpopulations are. It's those new gilts, and it's the piglets. And we also know that we can carry it. So we carry the flu between these older groups to the younger groups. We know that we have fomites. We know that we have lots of pigs in small places and small populations, small areas, regions. And we also know that people go to work and sometimes don't feel real good, but they still need to get paid. And so sometimes we bring flu in on ourselves. That's actually quite common, and that's really, it's one of the things that's hard to manage because you need to be able to take care of the pigs. So how can we implement whole herd approach? Well, there are three pretty common ways out in our industry that I've got examples here, but as we move out into the solutions approach, again, you've heard it before, let's address Site 1 endemicity. At Site 1 endemicity means that we'll characterize our current status. If we've got flu circulating in the farm, let's hit it. We're used to mass vaccinating our sow herds on a scheduled time, seasonally, however we want to call it, but let's do it like we want to do it across the whole herd, including our piglets and including the gilts. And then implement this immunization to the subsequent replacement animals. We need to address what we do not as well or what we could do better in the farrowing house. We really need to understand that our management is part of the problem. So we need to address our people movement, our tools, and the animal movements, whether that's sows or whether that's pigs, and implement best practices for biosecurity. And finally, the tool, just a tool, but is the best tool at the current time, is that we preventive vaccinate the piglets and the gilts. It's really the focus, so that we're protecting our sow herd with the gilts that would come in, but we're also protecting the piglets themselves as they go out into the growing areas. These last two are things that we actually could just tag on. So we've got herd closure events. If we're closing herds for PRRS, why not include herd closure with flu as well? So it's the same process, but think about it. What do I have to do a little bit differently or in addition with the flu? It's the same thing. So take advantage of these herd closures and really identify where we can implement flu solutions in these events. And then last, if we batch farrow, and if some of our systems are going to batch farrow, we're accomplishing a lot of the problems that we've created with our continuous flow farrowing houses. If we batch farrow, we're all in, all out, as long as we do a good job of cleaning and disinfecting, and if our gilts aren't bringing new flus in, we actually are ahead of the game in these systems. The animals are similar ages, so we're not moving oldest back to youngest, which is where flu tends to go. And then you really don't have differences in the rooms. And so, again, if we use vaccine to homogenize the populations, we're already there. So again, these are opportunities where whole herd approach just fits. And the why it works, we're maximizing immunity, blanket, homogenizing, robust immunization, and then the gilts, of course, and minimizing transmission. So all in, all out, addressing the high-risk farrowing house, and best practices for sanitation. And that's my 10-minute talk, I think. Thank you very much.